What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis next. Since Dricus du Plessis' win over Sean Strickland, it's continued to look as though the newly crowned champ and Israel Adesanya would collide for his first title defense. Of course, at the same time, Sean Strickland was making his case for a rematch, creating quite a bit of uncertainty around the division. This week, the UFC announced on social media that they would be heading to Perth for UFC 305 on August 18th, with Fox Sports' Nick Walshaw indicating that Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya could compete in the main event. So far, there's been no word from du Plessis and Adesanya on the fight. However, the champ may have something to say about the fight taking place in the last Stylbender's backyard, after expressing his desire for the two to throw down in South Africa. As du Plessis also indicated in early March, he's been aiming for a May return, meaning that the champ will likely be more than ready to defend his title come the end of summer. With the UFC also confirming a Whittaker versus Chimaev bout for Saudi Arabia, talk of a DDP versus Adesanya bout for UFC 305 leaves former middleweight champion Sean Strickland in an interesting position. In the wake of the report indicating that the UFC was looking into a du Plessis versus Adesanya fight, the former champion took to social media, writing, "The UFC fans want me and Dricus to settle it. Dricus wants to settle it. We all know I fought in a dirty liberal country who fucked me. Dana knows it. The UFC knows it. If it was anyone else on the roster, the rematch would happen. Do the right thing, UFC. If the main event grudge match is finalized, it'll be interesting to see if Strickland is given a fight against another top-ranked contender, such as Paulo Costa, on the same card." Next up, let's take a look at Dana White heated exchange with UFC sponsor. UFC CEO Dana White is never one to shy away from speaking his mind. In the past, he's been criticized as a businessman for his staunch support of former US President Donald Trump, as well as his support of longtime commentator Joe Rogan, who nearly found himself fired after a compilation of him using racial slurs went viral. After revealing recently that he threatened to quit if Rogan lost his job, White recalled a time he was at odds with one of the UFC sponsors while speaking with Sage Steele on her podcast.
I was with some sponsors too that called, and I was like, go f yourself. I don't want your money. I don't want this kind of money. They called me. They called me when I posted a video on my own social media about Trump. They called me about Joe Rogan. They called me about going through COVID. If somebody stubbed their toe, they called me on the thing. And finally I got to the point and said, I'm f***ing done, guys. So then, when it was time when our contract was up, there was a big number on the table, and I said, take that huge number, roll it up into a little ball, and shove it right up your board of directors.
As White has made it clear, if a partnership requires bending the knee and making concessions for sponsors, he and the UFC are not interested. Next up, let's take a look at Robert Whittaker reacts to Khamzat Chimaev fight. Former middleweight champion Robert Whittaker was recently confirmed for a middleweight bout with Khamzat Chimaev in Saudi Arabia. With the fight being a potential title eliminator, the stakes are at an all-time high for the former champ as he steps into the octagon against one of the most hyped contenders in the sport. During a recent episode of his MMA Arcade podcast, Whittaker reacted to the news of the fight being official.
I cannot wait. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the fight. I understand he's a hard fighter. He likes to grapple a lot. He uses his reach and range to good effectiveness. He's got knockout power. He likes to play the villain against these guys, against his opponents. But I'm looking for an honor. He's an honorable fighter. Like, we're going to get in there and we're going to have an honest fight. We're both going to leave it there. He's not a quitter. I'm not a quitter. Yeah. So I look forward to really, making history in Saudi Arabia.
When the fight was announced, Chimaev opened as a betting favorite on betonline.ag with negative 190 odds. On the flip side, Whittaker opened as a plus 165 underdog. Since then, those odds have narrowed, with Chimaev sitting as a negative 160 favorite to Whittaker's status as a plus 140 underdog. With the stakes at an all-time high, the UFC's first ever event in Saudi Arabia is shaping up to be a big one. Next, let's take a look at Tom Aspinall reveals next UFC fight. Dana White recently made it clear that nothing has changed, and Jon Jones will in fact be fighting Stipe Miocic when he returns to action. However, as he also indicated, if Tom Aspinall wants to defend the interim heavyweight title in the meantime, that's okay with him.
Jones is set to fight Stipe. I hope the winner of that fight will fight Tom. Yeah, I mean, if you think right now it's March, right? Who knows? Jon Jones and Stipe, because of the injury and who knows when they'll fight, it's not right to let Tom sit. And if Tom wants to defend the title, we'll absolutely do it.
With White also revealing the promotion's plans to return to the UK for a pay-per-view event this year, it seems as though it's simply a matter of time before Aspinall has a fight announced. In a video for his YouTube channel, he spoke about the situation.
I cannot confirm or deny because I will be getting told off if I do either, but I'm hearing strong rumours and I'm in talks right now with the UFC about what's going to happen, what's going to be our next step, stuff like that. Nothing that I can announce yet, nothing like set in stone yet, but we're moving in the right direction with it all.
With Aspinall previously indicating that he would be interested in defending the interim title against Curtis Blades, the UFC could look to finalize the bout in time to make a big announcement at UFC 300 regarding fights for Leon Edwards and Tom Aspinall, given that White has already teased both champions fighting at the event. Next, let's take a look at George St Pierre would have beat Khabib. While George St Pierre was already retired by the time Khabib Nurmagomedov defeated Al Iaquinta to win the vacant lightweight title in 2018, there were rumors that the Hall of Famer was going to return to fight the Eagle. During a recent appearance on Kamaru Usman and Henry Cejudo's Pound for Pound podcast, St Pierre spoke about the potential fight, breaking down the stylistic difference between the two. As he explained, Nurmagomedov was at his best when pressuring opponents along the fence, whereas he thrived on being a dynamic fighter with proactive and reactive takedowns from the center. As he also indicated, his strategy for a fight with Nurmagomedov would have been to keep things in the center and not be afraid to attempt to take the Eagle down.
I can say whatever I want, but I think Khabib could have beat me. I'm not saying I would have beat Khabib all the time. I was confident enough to take that fight that I was thinking that if I take that fight, I'm gonna beat him that day at that particular place, at that particular, that doesn't mean I will beat him all the time, but I was confident, but maybe I'm wrong. I think I would have beat him because in a way that I was going, if he would have come to put pressure on me, I would have put him down. I would have been confident to try to go for it.
Khabib responded to GSP after George claimed he could beat Khabib. This is what Khabib said. "I learned from this guy a lot. Even hear he talk about me is so interesting. GSP all day." With both men now retired, this one certainly ranks on the all-time list of MMA what-ifs. And finally, let's take a look at UFC Fight Updates. Heading into this weekend's UFC Fight Night Atlantic City card, let's look at today's UFC Fight Updates, which consist of a number of fight announcements for the upcoming Saudi Arabia card on June 22nd, starting with a heavyweight bout between Sergey Pavlovich and Alexander Volkov, which comes on the heels of a reported booking between Alexander Volkov and Jailton Almeida at UFC 302. Although the bout had been reported by a number of outlets and was included on a previous segment of our UFC Fight Updates, Volkov will now meet Pavlovich on June 22nd, with Jailton Almeida expected to remain on the UFC 302 card. The UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia card will also see Kelvin Gastelum compete against Daniel Rodriguez in a welterweight bout that will see Gastelum look to bounce back from a December loss to Sean Brady, while on the flip side, Rodriguez will look to snap a two-fight skid that most recently saw him fall to Ian Gary back in May. The card will also play host to a clash between two of the most notable prospects in the sport, as Shara Magomedov and Ihor Potieria throw down in a middleweight bout that will see Magomedov look to pick up his second straight win inside the octagon and extend his unbeaten pro record, while Potieria looks to build on a February victory over Robert Burchek. Last but certainly not least in the way of UFC Fight Updates, we have a light heavyweight bout between Johnny Walker and Volkan Oezdemir, which will see Walker look to bounce back from a January loss to Magomed Ankalaev, while on the flip side, Oezdemir looks to build on a win over Bogdan Guskov in September. With the ball now rolling in regards to announcements for the historic card, expect more announcements in the weeks to come. Now, let's shift gears and take a look at Conor McGregor reveals the truth on MMA future. With repeated delays for his big comeback fight against Michael Chandler, many have questioned whether or not Conor McGregor will ever return to active competition. Between the money he's made and the horrific injury he sustained in his most recent bout, McGregor could ride off into the sunset and never fight another day in his life. As he indicated in a recent interview with TNT Sports, however, that won't be the case. While talking about how he takes inspiration from Mike Tyson and his plans for future fights in the UFC, he explained,
"Look at Tyson. Mike Tyson now is fighting Jake Paul, right? He's fighting him again. He fought Roy Jones also. So, there you go. That's an older guy. There's a reason in jiu-jitsu tournaments there's the veterans, the veteran division and all this. So I don't really feel like I could ever call a date with until I'm laid out flat and that's it in a box. So if these people are a similar age to me and I have an audience interested, which I do, Well, who's to say these fights won't take place whenever they'll take place? Do you get me? We're all, it's to the grave, my man. It's to the grave, yeah.
With his sights set on a comeback and his promotional obligations fulfilled for Roadhouse, McGregor is back in the gym at SBG Ireland and was seen in a video with Johnny Walker. Conor looks noticeably smaller in the clip. Here's what the MMA community had to say. Okay, Conor actually looks like a lightweight here and doesn't look like a blown up middleweight. Why the F does McGregor look so skinny? Remember all the people who screamed Conor would never make 155 again? LOL, looks like he can make 155 in 2 days. Conor looking skinny, off the juice. Makes Conor look like a prepubescent girl. Holy sh*, dude looks like a 14-year-old boy. With McGregor back training, expect news on his UFC return in the weeks to come. Potentially at UFC 300, which will serve as a perfect opportunity for the UFC to announce more big fights for the remainder of the year. Money. Make sure to leave a comment and you might get featured in our next video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss any MMA news. Check out our video from yesterday if you missed it. See you tomorrow.